Question 1. The audit findings indicate a critical vulnerability in the customer data management system that requires immediate patching to prevent potential unauthorized access. The standard change management process, which involves a multi-day risk assessment and approval cycle, is too slow to address the urgency. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Implement the patch without any formal risk assessment or approval, prioritizing speed over procedural compliance. Option B. Expedite the risk assessment and approval process by engaging senior management or a designated emergency change committee to review and authorize the patch implementation within a compressed timeframe. Option C. Focus solely on applying the technical patch to the system, disregarding any potential downstream impacts on data privacy or regulatory reporting until after the fix is deployed. Option D. Immediately deploy the patch to the live system to mitigate the vulnerability, and then document the change and conduct a retrospective risk assessment. The correct answer is B. Expedite the risk assessment and approval process by engaging senior management or a designated emergency change committee to review and authorize the patch implementation within a compressed timeframe. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need to address a critical system vulnerability and the established procedures for change management and risk assessment. The pressure to act quickly to prevent potential data breaches or operational disruptions can lead to bypassing necessary controls, which, while seemingly efficient in the short term, can introduce greater risks and regulatory noncompliance. Careful judgment is required to balance the urgency of the situation with the imperative to maintain robust security and governance frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, albeit expedited, process of risk assessment and approval. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that even urgent changes are evaluated for their potential impact, security implications, and compliance with relevant regulations. Specifically, in a regulated environment like financial services, assuming a UK/CISI context for this exam, regulatory bodies such as the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, and the Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, mandate robust risk management and data protection. A rapid risk assessment, even if condensed, demonstrates due diligence in identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities introduced by the proposed fix. Obtaining appropriate authorization, even from a designated senior individual or committee under emergency protocols, ensures accountability and adherence to governance policies. This approach upholds the principles of proportionality and risk-based decision-making, which are central to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the fix without any form of risk assessment or approval is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses critical control mechanisms designed to prevent unintended consequences, such as introducing new vulnerabilities or disrupting other critical systems. It directly contravenes principles of good governance and risk management expected by regulators. It also fails to uphold the duty of care owed to customers and stakeholders by not adequately safeguarding their data or ensuring system integrity. Implementing the fix and then retrospectively documenting the process without prior assessment or approval is also professionally unacceptable. While documentation is important, it does not substitute for proactive risk management. This approach suggests a disregard for established procedures and a lack of commitment to a proactive security posture. It can be viewed as an attempt to circumvent accountability and may be seen as a breach of internal policies and potentially regulatory requirements for timely risk identification and mitigation. Focusing solely on the technical fix without considering its broader implications on data privacy or regulatory reporting obligations is another failure. This narrow focus ignores the interconnectedness of IT systems with legal and ethical responsibilities. For instance, a fix that inadvertently compromises data anonymization or alters data logging mechanisms could lead to breaches of data protection laws, e.g., GDPR in a UK context, or reporting requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should first understand the urgency and potential impact of the vulnerability. They should then consult internal policies and procedures for emergency change management. If existing protocols are insufficient, they should escalate the situation to seek guidance on an expedited but still controlled process. The decision-making framework should prioritize 1. Immediate threat containment. 2. Rapid, proportionate risk assessment. 3. Appropriate authorization. 4. Controlled implementation. And 5. Thorough post-implementation review and documentation. This structured approach ensures that urgent actions are taken responsibly and in compliance with regulatory and ethical standards. Question 2. Regulatory review indicates that a sales representative is being invited by a potential client, with whom the company is in negotiations for a significant contract, to an exclusive, high-profile sporting event. The cost of the tickets and associated hospitality is substantial and exceeds the typical threshold for business entertainment outlined in the company's internal policy. The client has explicitly stated that this is a gesture of goodwill and an opportunity to build rapport before the final contract signing. Option A. Seek immediate clarification from the company's compliance department regarding the appropriateness of accepting this invitation, referencing the specific details of the event and the client's stated intent, and await their guidance before making a decision. Option B. Accept the invitation and attend the event, viewing it as a valuable networking opportunity that is standard practice in the industry for securing major deals. Option C. Accept the invitation but ensure that the cost is not disclosed to the company and that no formal record of attendance is made to avoid complications. Option D. Politely decline the invitation, citing a prior commitment, and suggest a more modest, policy-compliant meeting at a later date. The correct answer is A. Seek immediate clarification from the company's compliance department regarding the appropriateness of accepting this invitation, referencing the specific details of the event and the client's stated intent, and await their guidance before making a decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a desire to secure a significant contract and the obligation to adhere to ethical principles and regulatory guidelines concerning gifts and hospitality. The pressure to close a deal can lead to overlooking potential ethical breaches or misinterpreting the intent and scope of permissible interactions. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate business courtesies and actions that could be construed as bribery or undue influence, which could jeopardize both individual careers and the company's reputation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes transparency, adherence to company policy, and regulatory compliance. By seeking clarification from the compliance department and documenting the interaction, the employee demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and responsible decision-making. This proactive step ensures that any hospitality offered or accepted aligns with the company's established gift and entertainment policy, which is designed to prevent conflicts of interest and maintain the integrity of business dealings. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and regulatory expectations regarding anti-bribery and corruption. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves accepting the lavish hospitality without question. This fails to acknowledge the potential for the gift to be perceived as an attempt to influence the decision-making process, thereby violating ethical standards and potentially contravening anti-bribery regulations. It bypasses the necessary due diligence and could lead to accusations of impropriety. Another incorrect approach is to decline the hospitality outright without seeking any clarification or understanding the context. While seemingly cautious, this might be overly rigid and could miss an opportunity for legitimate relationship building within the bounds of acceptable practice. It also fails to leverage internal resources like the compliance department, which are in place to guide such situations. A third incorrect approach is to accept the hospitality but downplay its significance or fail to report it. This demonstrates a lack of transparency and a disregard for internal controls and reporting mechanisms. Such an omission can be interpreted as an attempt to conceal a potential ethical lapse, undermining trust, and potentially leading to more severe consequences if discovered. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, identify the potential ethical and regulatory implications. Second, consult relevant company policies and procedures, particularly those related to gifts, hospitality, and anti-bribery. Third, if ambiguity exists, seek guidance from the appropriate internal departments, such as compliance or legal. Fourth, document all interactions and decisions. Finally, act in a manner that upholds the highest standards of integrity and professionalism, prioritizing long-term reputation and compliance over short-term gains. Question 3. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive understanding of potential threats and opportunities. When developing a framework for risk assessment within a financial services firm, which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory expectations and ethical best practices for proactive risk management? Option A. Signing the primary responsibility for risk assessment to the compliance department without involving operational or strategic management. Option B. Relying exclusively on past incident reports to identify and assess all potential risks, assuming the future will mirror the past. Option C. Implementing a continuous risk assessment process that incorporates both historical data and forward-looking analysis of emerging trends, with clear escalation procedures for identified risks. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment only after a major operational failure to understand the root causes and prevent recurrence. The correct answer is C. Implementing a continuous risk assessment process that incorporates both historical data and forward-looking analysis of emerging trends, with clear escalation procedures for identified risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for proactive risk identification with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the dynamic nature of business operation. A failure to adequately assess risks can lead to significant financial, reputational, and operational damage, while an overly burdensome or inefficient risk assessment process can stifle innovation and productivity. Careful judgment is required to ensure the risk assessment framework is both comprehensive and proportionate to the organization's activities and risk appetite. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it emphasizes a structured, systematic, and ongoing process for identifying, analyzing, and evaluating potential risks. This aligns with principles of sound corporate governance and risk management, often mandated by regulatory bodies to ensure the stability and integrity of financial institutions and other regulated entities. A robust risk assessment process allows for the early detection of threats, the development of appropriate mitigation strategies, and informed decision-making, thereby safeguarding the organization's assets and objectives. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining compliance and fostering resilience. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying solely on historical data without considering emerging threats or changes in the business environment. This fails to meet regulatory expectations for forward-looking risk management and can lead to a false sense of security. It is ethically problematic as it neglects the duty of care to stakeholders by not adequately preparing for future uncertainties. Another incorrect approach is to conduct risk assessments only when a significant incident has occurred. This reactive stance is a clear failure of due diligence and regulatory compliance, as it demonstrates a lack of proactive risk management. Ethically, it prioritizes damage control over prevention, which is irresponsible and can lead to repeated failures. A third incorrect approach is to delegate risk assessment entirely to junior staff without adequate oversight or expertise. This can result in superficial analysis, missed critical risks, and a lack of accountability. It violates professional standards of competence and due care, and regulatory frameworks typically require that risk management functions are adequately resourced and staffed with experienced personnel. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the organization's strategic objectives and risk appetite. This should be followed by establishing a clear methodology for risk identification, assessment, including likelihood and impact, and evaluation. The process must be integrated into business operations, involve relevant stakeholders, and be subject to regular review and updates. This iterative approach ensures that risk management remains relevant and effective in a changing environment, fulfilling both regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities. Question 4. System analysis indicates a potential for significant time savings by automating a critical data entry process. However, the proposed automated system has not undergone any formal testing for data accuracy or its impact on downstream regulatory reporting. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure both operational efficiency and compliance? Option A. Defer the automation project indefinitely due to the potential risks to data integrity and regulatory compliance, opting to maintain the current manual process. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive pilot test of the automated system in a controlled environment, focusing on data accuracy, completeness, and its effect on regulatory reports before full deployment. Option C. Implement the automated system immediately to realize the projected time savings, with a plan to address any data issues that may arise later. Option D. Proceed with the automation, but only perform basic system functionality checks, assuming data integrity will be maintained. Correct answer is C. Implement the automated system immediately to realize the projected time savings, with a plan to address any data issues that may arise later. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization where a proposed change, while seemingly efficient on the surface, carries potential risks to data integrity and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in balancing the desire for improved operational speed with the absolute necessity of adhering to established data handling protocols and reporting standards, which are often dictated by regulatory bodies. The pressure to demonstrate immediate efficiency gains can create a conflict with the more cautious, compliance-driven approach. Careful judgment is required to assess the true impact of the proposed change beyond its immediate operational benefits. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, phased validation of the proposed automated data entry system. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing data accuracy and regulatory adherence. Specifically, it necessitates a pilot testing phase to identify any discrepancies or errors in data capture and transfer before full implementation. This approach is justified by regulatory frameworks that mandate accurate record-keeping and data integrity for reporting and audit purposes. For instance, in financial services, regulations like those from the FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, in the UK emphasize the importance of reliable data for market integrity and consumer protection. Implementing a new system without rigorous testing risks generating inaccurate reports, leading to potential regulatory breaches, fines, and reputational damage. This phased approach ensures that any issues are identified and rectified in a controlled environment, safeguarding compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the automated system immediately without any form of validation or pilot testing represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for data integrity, which is a cornerstone of most regulatory frameworks. This approach risks generating erroneous data, leading to non-compliance with reporting obligations and potentially misleading stakeholders or regulators. Adopting a partial validation that only checks for system functionality but not data accuracy or completeness is also professionally unacceptable. While it might ensure the system runs, it fails to address the core requirement of producing reliable data. This can lead to subtle but critical errors that are difficult to detect later, still resulting in regulatory noncompliance and flawed decision-making. Focusing solely on the speed improvement without any consideration for the impact on data quality or regulatory reporting is a clear ethical lapse. It prioritizes a narrow operational metric over broader responsibilities, potentially jeopardizing the organization's compliance status and trustworthiness. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a decision should employ a risk-based approach. This involves 1. Identifying all potential impacts of the proposed change, including operational, financial, and regulatory. 2. Assessing the likelihood and severity of each risk, with a particular focus on compliance risks. 3. Evaluating proposed solutions against these risks, prioritizing those that maintain or enhance data integrity and regulatory adherence. 4. Implementing changes in a controlled, phased manner, with robust testing and validation at each stage. 5. Documenting all decisions, testing procedures, and outcomes to demonstrate due diligence and compliance. This systematic process ensures that efficiency gains are pursued responsibly, without compromising the organization's legal and ethical obligations. Question 5. Implementation of a new customer relationship management system requires the analysis of historical customer interaction data to identify trends and improve service offerings. What is the most appropriate data handling approach to ensure compliance with data privacy regulations while enabling effective service improvement? Option A. Pseudonymize customer data by replacing direct identifiers with unique codes, maintaining a separate, securely stored key for re-identification purposes only by authorized personnel for specific service improvement analysis. Option B. Completely anonymize all customer data by removing all potential identifiers, rendering it impossible to link back to any individual customer. Option C. Process identifiable customer data directly without any anonymization or pseudonymization, relying solely on internal access controls. Option D. Implement superficial pseudonymization by replacing names with generic labels, without a secure mechanism for re-identification. The correct answer is A. Pseudonymize customer data by replacing direct identifiers with unique codes, maintaining a separate, securely stored key for re-identification purposes only by authorized personnel for specific service improvement analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for efficient data processing with the stringent requirements of data privacy regulations. The core difficulty lies in determining the appropriate level of anonymization or pseudonymization to protect sensitive customer information, while still allowing for meaningful analysis to improve services. Misinterpreting or inadequately applying these principles can lead to significant regulatory breaches, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance without unduly hindering business objectives. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves implementing robust pseudonymization techniques that allow for re-identification under controlled circumstances, thereby enabling detailed customer service analysis. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, as data is processed for a specific, legitimate business purpose, service improvement. Pseudonymization, when implemented correctly with strong security measures for the re-identification key, offers a balance between data utility and privacy protection, often being a preferred method under data protection frameworks that allow for the processing of personal data for legitimate interests, provided appropriate safeguards are in place. This approach respects the individual's right to privacy while enabling the organization to derive valuable insights. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves complete anonymization of all customer data before analysis. This is problematic because it can render the data useless for the intended purpose of improving specific customer services, as the link to individual customer interactions is lost. While it offers the highest level of privacy, it fails the principle of proportionality and data utility, potentially leading to suboptimal business decisions. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with analysis using identifiable customer data without any form of pseudonymization or anonymization. This represents a direct violation of data privacy regulations, failing to implement adequate technical and organizational measures to protect personal data. It disregards the fundamental rights of individuals regarding their personal information and exposes the organization to severe penalties. A third incorrect approach is to implement superficial pseudonymization, such as simply replacing names with generic identifiers without robust controls over the re-identification process. This creates a false sense of security while still leaving customer data vulnerable to unauthorized access or re-identification, thereby failing to meet the standard of adequate protection required by data privacy laws. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach. First, identify the specific data processing activity and its purpose. Second, assess the sensitivity of the data involved and the potential risks to individuals' rights and freedoms. Third, determine the most appropriate data protection technique, anonymization, pseudonymization, or other safeguards, that balances the legitimate business need with the privacy rights of individuals, ensuring compliance with all applicable regulations. This involves consulting legal and compliance experts and documenting the decision-making process. Question 6. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a key component supplier for an upcoming product launch has raised a concern about a potential, albeit unconfirmed, quality deviation in a batch of parts. This deviation, if it materializes as a significant defect, could lead to increased product failure rates post-launch. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the company? Option A. Initiate an internal investigation involving the quality assurance and legal departments to assess the supplier's claim, consult relevant product safety regulations, and determine the potential impact, while simultaneously engaging with the supplier for further details and potential remediation. Option B. Inform the sales and marketing teams to prepare for potential customer complaints and warranty claims, while continuing to use the components as planned to meet launch deadlines. Option C. Immediately halt all production and development related to the product line until the supplier can provide absolute certainty that no quality issues exist, regardless of the cost and time implications. Option D. Proceed with the product launch as scheduled, assuming the supplier's concern is minor and unlikely to affect product performance significantly, to avoid delaying market entry and potential revenue loss. The correct answer is A. Initiate an internal investigation involving the quality assurance and legal departments to assess the supplier's claim, consult relevant product safety regulations, and determine the potential impact, while simultaneously engaging with the supplier for further details and potential remediation. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate cost-saving pressures and the long-term implications of product quality and customer trust. The company is facing a situation where a component supplier, crucial for a new product line, has notified of a potential quality issue that could lead to future product failures. The challenge lies in balancing the financial impact of a potential recall or warranty, claims against the reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny that could arise from knowingly using a substandard component. Careful judgment is required to assess the severity of the potential issue, the likelihood of failure, and the potential consequences for all stakeholders. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency, proactive risk management, and adherence to regulatory requirements. By immediately escalating the issue to relevant internal departments, quality assurance, legal, and senior management, and initiating an investigation into the supplier's claim, the company demonstrates a commitment to product integrity and customer safety. This aligns with general principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct, which mandate that companies act with due diligence and avoid knowingly placing defective products into the market. Furthermore, depending on the specific jurisdiction's product safety regulations, e.g., Consumer Protection Act in the UK, or similar legislation in other jurisdictions, knowingly using a component with a potential defect could lead to significant fines, product bans, and legal liabilities. This proactive stance also allows for timely communication with the supplier to rectify the issue or explore alternative sourcing, mitigating future risks. An incorrect approach that involves ignoring the supplier's notification or downplaying its significance would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate the duty of care owed to consumers and could contravene product safety laws that require manufacturers to ensure their products are safe for intended use. Such an approach prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term sustainability and customer well-being, leading to potential severe repercussions including recalls, lawsuits, and irreparable damage to brand reputation. Another incorrect approach, such as immediately halting production without a thorough investigation or consultation, could also be professionally unsound. While seemingly cautious, it might lead to unnecessary financial losses, supply chain disruptions, and could be perceived as an overreaction if the issue is minor or easily rectifiable. This could also negatively impact investor confidence and employee morale without a clear justification based on a comprehensive risk assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes 1. Information gathering, thoroughly understanding the nature and potential impact of the reported issue. 2. Risk evaluation, assessing the likelihood and severity of potential failures and their consequences. 3. Stakeholder analysis, considering the impact on customers, employees, shareholders, and regulators. 4. Option generation, identifying potential courses of action, including investigation, mitigation, and communication strategies. 5. Decision-making, selecting the option that best balances risk, ethical considerations, and regulatory compliance. 6. Implementation and monitoring, executing the chosen strategy and continuously monitoring its effectiveness. Question 7. The risk matrix shows a significant increase in the potential for regulatory breaches related to enhanced due diligence (ED) for a new category of high-risk clients. The business development team is pushing for rapid onboarding to capture market share. Which of the following actions best demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and professional integrity? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive review of the existing EDD policies and procedures, assess their adequacy for the new client category, and implement necessary enhancements in consultation with compliance and legal departments before onboarding any clients from this category. Option B. Delegate the responsibility for conducting EDD for the new client category to the junior compliance officers, trusting their diligence to flag any significant issues. Option C. Rely on the business development team's assurances that these new clients are low risk based on their prior interactions and market knowledge, without conducting formal EDD. Option D. Expedite the onboarding process for the new client category by streamlining existing EDD checks, assuming that the current procedures are sufficient for most clients. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive review of the existing EDD policies and procedures, assess their adequacy for the new client category, and implement necessary enhancements in consultation with compliance and legal departments before onboarding any clients from this category. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for business growth with the long-term imperative of maintaining robust regulatory compliance. The pressure to onboard new clients quickly can lead to shortcuts in due diligence, which, if not managed carefully, can expose the firm to significant risks, including financial penalties, reputational damage, and regulatory sanctions. The core of the challenge lies in implementing effective controls that are both efficient and thorough, ensuring that the firm adheres to its obligations without unduly hindering legitimate business activities. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented review of the enhanced due diligence (ED) process. This involves not just identifying potential risks, but also actively assessing the adequacy of existing controls and implementing necessary improvements. By engaging with relevant stakeholders, including compliance, legal, and business development teams, the firm ensures a comprehensive understanding of the risks and a collaborative approach to mitigation. This aligns with regulatory expectations that firms should have risk-based systems and controls in place to prevent financial crime. Specifically, it reflects the principles of a strong compliance culture, proactive risk management, and adherence to Know Your Customer (KIC) and anti-money laundering (AML) regulations, which mandate appropriate due diligence based on risk. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on expediting client onboarding without a commensurate review of EDD procedures fails to adequately address the identified risks. This could lead to regulatory breaches, such as inadequate customer due diligence, which is a direct violation of AML regulations. It demonstrates a disregard for the firm's risk appetite and a potential failure to implement a risk-based approach, exposing the firm to onboarding high-risk clients without sufficient safeguards. Another incorrect approach that involves delegating the entire EDD review to junior staff without adequate oversight or training is also professionally unacceptable. This not only increases the likelihood of errors and omissions in the due diligence process, but also fails to foster a culture of compliance. Regulators expect that individuals responsible for compliance functions are competent and adequately trained, and that senior management maintains oversight. This approach could result in a failure to identify red flags or to apply appropriate EDD measures, leading to potential breaches of regulatory requirements. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or past experience without a formal, documented risk assessment is problematic. While experience is valuable, regulatory compliance demands a structured, evidence-based approach. Relying on assumptions rather than a systematic review of controls and risks can lead to blind spots and an inability to demonstrate compliance to regulators. This approach lacks the rigor and accountability expected in a regulated environment. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This begins with identifying potential risks, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and then determining appropriate mitigation strategies. In this context, it means understanding the specific risks associated with the new client segment, assessing the current EDD controls against these risks, and then deciding on the necessary adjustments. This decision-making process should be documented, involve relevant stakeholders, and be subject to regular review and testing to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance. Question 8. Operational review demonstrates that a key project team is significantly understaffed, impacting critical deadlines. A highly qualified candidate, known personally to the hiring manager, has expressed immediate availability and a strong interest in the role. However, this candidate has not yet completed the full technical assessment and behavioral interview process that all other applicants are undergoing. The hiring manager is considering recommending this candidate for immediate hire, bypassing the standard assessment steps to expedite the process. Option A. Proceed with the full standard assessment process for all candidates, including the personally known individual, to ensure a fair and objective evaluation based on defined criteria. Option B. Prioritize the personally known candidate by waiving the technical assessment and proceeding directly to a final interview, while still requiring other candidates to complete all standard steps. Option C. Inform the personally known candidate of the urgency and offer them the role contingent on passing a condensed version of the assessment, while continuing the standard process for other candidates. Option D. Recommend the personally known candidate for immediate hire, given their immediate availability and the critical staffing needs, and complete their assessment process post-hire. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the full, standard assessment process for all candidates, including the personally known individual, to ensure a fair and objective evaluation based on defined criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term strategic goals and ethical considerations, all within the framework of the Panasonic hiring assessment test's implied regulatory environment, which we will assume aligns with general best practices for corporate hiring and data privacy, as no specific jurisdiction is provided beyond the exam context. The pressure to fill a critical role quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the hiring process and potentially violate ethical standards or implied data protection guidelines. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness, compliance, and the selection of the most suitable candidate. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough and objective evaluation of all candidates against defined criteria. This aligns with principles of fair hiring, which are implicitly expected in any professional assessment. It ensures that the decision is based on merit and suitability, minimizing bias and the risk of selecting an underqualified candidate who might negatively impact the team or company. This approach also respects the privacy and effort of all applicants by giving each a fair hearing. An incorrect approach that bypasses standard assessment procedures for a favored candidate would represent a significant ethical failure, undermines the integrity of the hiring process, creating an unfair environment for other applicants, and potentially leading to the selection of a less competent individual based on personal preference rather than objective qualifications. This could also lead to legal challenges if it can be demonstrated that the process was discriminatory or violated any implied data privacy regulations concerning candidate information. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the candidate's immediate availability without a full assessment of their skills and cultural fit, is also professionally unsound. While speed is a factor, it should not override the fundamental requirement of ensuring the candidate is the best long-term fit for the role and the company. This could lead to high turnover, increased training costs, and decreased team productivity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the role requirements and assessment criteria beforehand. 2. Ensuring all candidates are evaluated against these objective criteria. 3. Seeking input from relevant stakeholders to ensure a well-rounded assessment. 4. Documenting the decision-making process to ensure transparency and accountability. 5. Prioritizing fairness and ethical conduct throughout the entire hiring lifecycle. Question 9. Investigation of a serious allegation of data privacy breach by a senior employee, where initial internal discussions suggest a potential for significant reputational damage and financial penalties if confirmed. The immediate supervisor of the accused employee has expressed a desire to handle this internally and quietly to avoid external scrutiny. Option A. Immediately dismiss the allegation based on the supervisor's recommendation to avoid internal disruption and potential negative publicity. Option B. Delegate the entire investigation process to the accused employee's direct supervisor to manage the situation discreetly. Option C. Initiate a formal, independent investigation led by the company's compliance department or an external investigator to thoroughly gather facts and assess the validity of the allegation. Option D. Conduct a brief, informal review of readily available documents without interviewing key personnel or the accused employee to determine if the allegation warrants further attention. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal, independent investigation led by the company's compliance department or an external investigator to thoroughly gather facts and assess the validity of the allegation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to quickly resolve a potential issue and the regulatory obligation to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation. The pressure to minimize disruption and reputational damage can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the process. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for efficiency with the imperative of fairness and compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a formal, independent investigation. This aligns with best professional practice and regulatory expectations for handling potential misconduct. It ensures objectivity by involving individuals or a team without direct involvement in the alleged issue, thereby preventing bias. This approach upholds the principles of due process, allowing for the collection of all relevant facts before any conclusions are drawn or actions are taken. It also demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance, which is crucial for maintaining trust with stakeholders and avoiding potential legal repercussions. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately dismiss the complaint without any further inquiry. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of taking all allegations seriously and can lead to the overlooking of genuine misconduct, creating a hostile work environment and exposing the company to legal liability. It also signals a lack of commitment to a fair and transparent process. Another incorrect approach is to delegate the investigation solely to the direct manager of the accused employee. This creates an unacceptable conflict of interest. The manager may be influenced by personal relationships, loyalty to the employee, or pressure to protect their team's reputation, compromising the impartiality of the investigation. This approach fails to meet the standard of an independent review and can result in biased findings. A third incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial inquiry, focusing only on readily available information and avoiding deeper probing or interviewing key witnesses. This approach is insufficient to establish the facts and can lead to inaccurate conclusions. It fails to meet the regulatory requirement for a comprehensive investigation and can result in unfair outcomes for all parties involved, potentially leading to further disputes and legal challenges. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making framework. First, they must recognize the seriousness of any allegation and the potential for regulatory breaches. Second, they should consult relevant company policies and procedures for investigations. Third, they must prioritize objectivity and impartiality, ensuring that the investigation is conducted by an independent party or team. Fourth, they should gather all relevant evidence systematically and fairly. Finally, they must ensure that any actions taken are based on the findings of a thorough and impartial investigation, adhering to all applicable laws and ethical standards. Question 10. What factors determine the appropriate level of customer data sharing within a project team when internal policies provide ambiguous guidance on confidentiality and access? Option A. Interpreting the policy in the most restrictive manner possible to avoid any potential data privacy risks, even if it impedes project progress. Option B. Seeking formal clarification from the company's compliance officer or legal department regarding the policy's intent and scope. Option C. Proceeding with the assumption that the policy permits broad data sharing within the project team to facilitate efficient collaboration. Option D. Relying on the informal advice of a senior colleague who has experience with similar projects. The correct answer is B. Seeking formal clarification from the company's compliance officer or legal department regarding the policy's intent and scope. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the interpretation and application of internal company policies and potentially external regulatory guidelines related to data privacy and information security. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient internal communication and collaboration with the imperative to protect sensitive customer data from unauthorized access or disclosure. The ambiguity in the policy's wording and the potential for differing interpretations among team members necessitate careful judgment to avoid breaches of confidentiality, regulatory noncompliance, and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and compliant method by seeking clarification from the designated compliance officer or legal department. This represents best professional practice because it adheres to established internal governance structures and external regulatory frameworks. Assuming the Panasonic hiring assessment test, implies a jurisdiction with data protection laws like GDPR or similar. Consulting with experts ensures that the interpretation of the policy aligns with legal obligations and industry best practices for data handling. This minimizes the risk of unintentional data breaches, fines, and loss of customer trust. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence, which are paramount in any professional setting, especially within a technology-focused organization like Panasonic. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the assumption that the policy allows for broad sharing of customer data within the project team without explicit confirmation. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it risks violating data privacy laws and internal policies designed to protect sensitive information. It bypasses the established channels for policy interpretation, potentially leading to unauthorized disclosure and severe consequences. Another incorrect approach is to interpret the policy in the most restrictive manner possible, thereby hindering necessary collaboration and project progress. While seemingly cautious, this approach fails to consider the practical operational needs of the project and may not be the intended interpretation of the policy. It can lead to inefficiencies and missed opportunities, but the primary failure is a lack of informed decision-making based on a thorough understanding of the policy's intent and scope. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the informal advice of a senior colleague who may not be an expert in compliance or data privacy. This is a critical ethical and regulatory failure because it delegates the responsibility of interpreting a policy with significant legal implications to an individual who may lack the necessary expertise or authority. This informal advice could be inaccurate, leading to non-compliance and potential liability for both the individual and the company. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a structured decision-making process. First, identify the ambiguity or potential risk in the policy. Second, consult the relevant internal resources, such as the compliance department, legal counsel, or a designated policy expert to seek clarification. Third, document the request for clarification and the received guidance. Fourth, if immediate clarification is not possible and the situation is time-sensitive, assess the potential impact of different interpretations and, if necessary, implement the most conservative approach that still allows for essential business functions while awaiting definitive guidance. Finally, ensure that all actions taken are in line with both internal policies and applicable external regulations. Question 11. When evaluating a critical business decision with a tight deadline and encountering conflicting information from different departments regarding potential risks, which approach best demonstrates sound professional judgment and adherence to ethical principles? Option A. Proceed with the decision based on the information from the department that is most senior, assuming their assessment is the most accurate. Option B. Immediately implement the decision to meet the deadline, deferring any detailed risk assessment until after the deadline has passed. Option C. Halt the decision-making process indefinitely until a perfect consensus on all potential risks can be achieved, regardless of the deadline. Option D. Convene a meeting with representatives from all involved departments to discuss the conflicting information, conduct a thorough risk assessment, and collaboratively determine the best course of action. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the decision based on the information from the department that is most senior, assuming their assessment is the most accurate. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate business pressures with long-term ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet a deadline can tempt individuals to overlook potential risks or to make decisions based on incomplete information, which can lead to significant negative consequences for the company and its stakeholders. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are not only expedient, but also responsible and aligned with professional standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured and thorough decision-making process that incorporates risk assessment and ethical considerations. By seeking input from relevant departments and considering potential impacts, the individual demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and responsible corporate behavior. This aligns with the principles of good governance and the ethical obligations of professionals to act in the best interests of the company and its stakeholders, while also adhering to any applicable regulatory frameworks that mandate such diligence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting the deadline without adequate risk assessment would fail to uphold professional responsibility. This could lead to regulatory breaches if the rushed decision results in non-compliance with industry standards or legal requirements. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for potential harm to customers, the company's reputation, or financial stability. Another incorrect approach that relies on personal intuition or the opinion of a single, potentially biased, individual ignores the importance of diverse perspectives and objective analysis. This can lead to flawed decisions that overlook critical factors and may violate principles of fairness and transparency. A third incorrect approach that involves deferring the decision indefinitely without a clear plan to address the underlying issue is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of accountability and can exacerbate the problem, potentially leading to more severe consequences later on, and failing to meet professional obligations to proactively manage risks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves clearly defining the problem, gathering relevant information from all necessary sources, identifying and evaluating potential solutions and their associated risks, consulting with stakeholders, making a reasoned decision, and then implementing and monitoring the outcome. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, ethically sound, and compliant with all applicable regulations. Question 12. Quality control measures reveal a minor discrepancy in the data logs from a critical component used in a new product line. While the discrepancy does not immediately suggest a safety hazard, it falls outside the acceptable tolerance range specified in the internal quality manual, which is designed to align with industry best practices and potential regulatory expectations. The product is scheduled for a major market launch in 2 weeks, and delaying the launch would incur significant financial penalties and damage market positioning. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Initiate a thorough investigation into the data discrepancy to identify its root cause and assess its impact, and do not proceed with the product launch until the issue is fully resolved and validated against all relevant standards. Option B. Immediately halt the product launch and conduct a comprehensive external audit of all data logs, even though the discrepancy appears isolated and minor, to ensure no other systemic issues exist. Option C. Proceed with the product launch as scheduled, and plan to address the data discrepancy through a post-launch software update or minor product revision if it becomes a more significant issue. Option D. Expedite the product launch by overriding the internal quality alert and documenting the discrepancy as a minor deviation that does not warrant immediate attention, assuming the component is still functional. The correct answer is A. Initiate a thorough investigation into the data discrepancy to identify its root cause and assess its impact, and do not proceed with the product launch until the issue is fully resolved and validated against all relevant standards. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for product release with the imperative of regulatory compliance and data integrity. The pressure to meet market demands can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential data discrepancies. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all regulatory obligations are met before any product is launched, even if it causes a delay. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the regulatory framework governing data handling and product approval. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of data integrity, accuracy, and completeness, which are fundamental to regulatory compliance in many jurisdictions, including those that might be relevant to a Panasonic hiring assessment test, e.g., General Principles of Quality Management and Product Safety Regulations. By initiating a thorough investigation and ensuring all data is validated against established standards, the company upholds its commitment to producing safe and reliable products and avoids potential penalties, reputational damage, and harm to consumers. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and robust quality control. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the product launch, despite the identified data anomalies, would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate principles of data integrity, potentially leading to the release of a product with unverified specifications or performance characteristics. Such an action could contravene regulations requiring accurate product information and adherence to quality standards. Ethically, it would be a breach of trust with consumers and stakeholders, prioritizing short-term gains over long-term safety and reliability. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to retroactively justify the data without a proper investigation, would also be a failure. This bypasses the essential steps of root cause analysis and corrective action, undermining the integrity of the quality control process. It suggests a disregard for the systematic identification and resolution of issues, which is a cornerstone of regulatory compliance and good corporate governance. This approach risks masking underlying problems that could have broader implications. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and document the discrepancy immediately. 2. Consult relevant internal policies and external regulatory guidelines. 3. Initiate a formal investigation to determine the root cause of the data anomaly. 4. Assess the potential impact of the anomaly on product safety, performance, and regulatory compliance. 5. Implement corrective and preventive actions based on the investigation findings. 6. Obtain necessary approvals and validations before proceeding with any product release or market activity. 7. Maintain clear and transparent communication with all relevant stakeholders throughout the process. Question 13. Operational review demonstrates that Panasonic is considering a significant international expansion into a new market where its current product lines are not yet established. While the company believes its existing internal compliance policies are robust, it is unclear whether specific regulatory approvals or notifications are required by the target market's financial regulatory authority before commencing operations and marketing activities. The legal and compliance departments have differing opinions on the urgency and necessity of seeking formal pre-clearance. What is the most prudent course of action for Panasonic to ensure compliance and mitigate potential risks associated with this international expansion? Option A. Proceed with the expansion, assuming that existing internal compliance policies are sufficient and that formal regulatory approval is not immediately necessary to gain a first-mover advantage. Option B. Initiate the expansion and notify the regulatory authority only after operations have commenced and initial market traction has been achieved, to avoid premature disclosure of strategic plans. Option C. Provide the regulatory authority with a summary of Panasonic's existing compliance framework and request a general opinion on its adequacy for the new market, without detailing the specific expansion plans. Option D. Proactively engage with the target market's financial regulatory authority to understand and fulfill all notification and approval requirements before commencing operations. The correct answer is D. Proactively engage with the target market's financial regulatory authority to understand and fulfill all notification and approval requirements before commencing operations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to expand its market reach and the stringent regulatory requirements designed to protect investors and market integrity. The challenge lies in balancing business objectives with compliance obligations, particularly when dealing with potentially sensitive information and the need for accurate, timely disclosures. Misjudging the regulatory landscape, prioritizing speed over accuracy, can lead to significant legal and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough and proactive engagement with the relevant regulatory body. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency and adherence to the law, which are foundational principles of financial market regulation. By seeking pre-clearance and providing all necessary documentation, the company is not only fulfilling its legal obligations, but also building trust with the regulator. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of future enforcement actions and ensures that the expansion is conducted in a compliant and sustainable manner. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and responsible market participation, which are implicitly or explicitly mandated by regulatory frameworks aimed at maintaining fair and orderly markets. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the expansion without seeking regulatory approval, relying on an interpretation that the activity falls outside the scope of current regulations. This is a failure to exercise due diligence and a potential violation of disclosure requirements. Regulators often have broad powers to interpret and apply regulations, and a narrow or self-serving interpretation can lead to penalties. This approach disregards the principle of regulatory compliance and the potential for unintended consequences. Another incorrect approach is to delay the notification process, hoping to gain a competitive advantage before the information becomes public. This constitutes a breach of timely disclosure obligations, which are critical for maintaining market fairness. Such delays can be construed as market manipulation or insider trading if material non-public information is used to gain an advantage. This approach undermines the integrity of the market and the trust placed in listed entities. A third incorrect approach is to provide incomplete or misleading information to the regulator. This is a direct violation of regulatory honesty and integrity requirements. Regulators rely on accurate information to assess compliance and protect investors. Providing false or incomplete data can result in severe penalties, including fines, sanctions, and reputational damage, and can be seen as an attempt to circumvent regulatory oversight. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a risk-based approach that prioritizes compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the relevant regulatory framework thoroughly. 2. Identifying potential compliance gaps or areas of uncertainty. 3. Seeking expert legal and compliance advice. 4. Engaging proactively and transparently with regulators. 5. Documenting all decisions and communications related to compliance. The ultimate goal is to ensure that business activities are conducted ethically and legally, safeguarding both the company and the broader market. Question 14. Governance review demonstrates that a proposed system upgrade for customer relationship management will significantly alter data handling processes and employee workflows. Which of the following approaches best ensures a responsible and compliant transition, minimizing potential negative impacts? Option A. Delegate the assessment to a small team of IT specialists to determine the technical feasibility and immediate operational changes. Option B. Prioritize the technical aspects of the upgrade and focus on achieving the projected cost savings with minimal disruption to the existing IT infrastructure. Option C. Implement the upgrade rapidly to realize benefits sooner, relying on post-implementation feedback to address any unforeseen issues. Option D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment, analyzing potential effects on data privacy, operational efficiency, employee roles, and customer experience, and develop mitigation strategies. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment, analyzing potential effects on data privacy, operational efficiency, employee roles, and customer experience, and develop mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of a significant change. The challenge lies in accurately predicting and mitigating potential negative impacts on various stakeholders, including employees, customers, and the company's reputation, all while adhering to regulatory requirements for change management and data protection. The complexity arises from the interconnectedness of these factors and the potential for unforeseen consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically identifies, analyzes, and evaluates the potential effects of the new system on all relevant areas. This includes considering operational workflows, data integrity, employee training needs, customer experience, and compliance with data privacy regulations. By proactively identifying risks and developing mitigation strategies, this approach ensures that the implementation is managed responsibly, minimizing disruption and maximizing the likelihood of a successful transition. This aligns with best professional practices that prioritize thorough due diligence and risk management in significant operational changes. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on the technical implementation and cost savings, neglecting the human element and potential regulatory breaches. This fails to consider the impact on employee morale, productivity, and the risk of data breaches or non-compliance with data protection laws, which could lead to significant fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach prioritizes speed of implementation over thoroughness, skipping critical steps like user acceptance testing and comprehensive risk analysis. This increases the likelihood of errors, system failures, and negative customer experiences, potentially leading to operational disruptions and a loss of customer trust. It also risks overlooking regulatory compliance requirements that might be identified during a more detailed assessment. A third incorrect approach involves relying on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few key individuals without a structured assessment process. This can lead to biased conclusions and a failure to identify broader impacts or risks. It bypasses the systematic, evidence-based approach required for responsible decision-making and can result in overlooking critical compliance issues or operational challenges. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to impact assessment. This involves defining the scope of the assessment, identifying all potential impacts, operational, financial, human, regulatory, reputational, evaluating the likelihood and severity of these impacts, and developing appropriate mitigation and contingency plans. Regular stakeholder engagement and clear communication throughout the process are crucial. Decision-making should be guided by a commitment to ethical conduct, regulatory compliance, and the long-term sustainability of the organization. Question 15. Compliance review shows that the automated risk assessment tool flagged several potential compliance issues related to new market entry. The team is under pressure to finalize the assessment quickly to meet a project deadline. Which of the following approaches best balances efficiency with thoroughness in this situation? Option A. Prioritize reviewing only the most severe risks flagged by the tool and delegate the review of less severe risks to junior staff with minimal oversight to expedite the process. Option B. Focus on the speed of the review, quickly acknowledging the flagged items and moving to the next stage of the project without in-depth investigation, as the tool is generally reliable. Option C. Conduct a detailed review of all flagged items, cross-referencing with internal policies and seeking input from relevant business units to understand the context and potential impact of each risk before finalizing the assessment. Option D. Accept the automated tool's output as definitive and proceed with mitigation plans for only the highest-rated risks, assuming the system has captured all critical vulnerabilities. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed review of all flagged items, cross-referencing with internal policies and seeking input from relevant business units to understand the context and potential impact of each risk before finalizing the assessment. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient risk identification with the potential for overlooking subtle but significant risks due to an over-reliance on automated tools. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that the risk assessment process is not merely a tick-box exercise, but a robust evaluation that considers both quantitative and qualitative factors. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it integrates human expertise with automated analysis. This ensures that the risk assessment is comprehensive, considering both the obvious risks flagged by the system and the less apparent risks that a seasoned professional might identify through experience and contextual understanding. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and prudent risk management, which necessitate a thorough and nuanced evaluation. Regulatory frameworks often emphasize the importance of a holistic risk assessment that goes beyond superficial checks. An incorrect approach that relies solely on automated flagging fails to meet professional standards because it can lead to a false sense of security. It may miss risks that are not easily quantifiable or that require a deeper understanding of the business context. This can result in regulatory breaches if critical risks are not identified and mitigated. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on historical data without considering emerging threats or changes in the business environment is also deficient. This static view can leave the organization vulnerable to new and evolving risks, potentially violating the principle of proactive risk management. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by quickly reviewing flagged items without proper investigation demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the potential consequences of unaddressed risks. This can lead to significant financial or reputational damage and potentially regulatory sanctions for failing to implement adequate controls. Professionals should approach risk assessment by first understanding the specific context of the organization and its operations. They should then leverage available tools, such as automated systems, to identify potential risks. However, this automated output must be critically reviewed and supplemented with qualitative analysis, expert judgment, and consideration of forward-looking factors. A structured process that includes clear documentation, regular review, and escalation of identified risks is crucial for effective risk management. Question 16. The control framework reveals a discrepancy in the interpretation of a new market regulation concerning the disclosure of preliminary financial results. A junior analyst, tasked with preparing the initial announcement, identifies a potential ambiguity that could lead to either a more conservative or a more aggressive interpretation of the disclosure requirements. The analyst is under pressure from the marketing department to release the announcement by the end of the day to capitalize on positive market sentiment. What is the most appropriate course of action for the analyst? Option A. Release the announcement with a disclaimer acknowledging the ambiguity in the regulation, allowing stakeholders to interpret the information as they see fit. Option B. Delay the announcement indefinitely until the analyst can independently research and definitively resolve the regulatory ambiguity, regardless of market pressure. Option C. Seek immediate clarification from the compliance department and await their guidance before proceeding with the announcement, even if it means delaying the release. Option D. Proceed with the more aggressive interpretation of the disclosure requirements to meet the marketing department's deadline, assuming the ambiguity favors a positive outlook. The correct answer is C. Seek immediate clarification from the compliance department and await their guidance before proceeding with the announcement, even if it means delaying the release. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for timely information dissemination and the imperative to ensure accuracy and compliance with internal policies and external regulations. The pressure to release information quickly, especially in a competitive market, can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the control framework. Careful judgment is required to balance speed with diligence. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to established internal control procedures and regulatory guidelines. By seeking clarification and ensuring all necessary approvals are obtained before dissemination, the individual upholds the principles of accuracy, completeness, and compliance, which are fundamental to maintaining market integrity and investor confidence. This aligns with the ethical duty to act with due care and diligence, as expected of professionals in regulated environments. An incorrect approach that involves disseminating the information without the requisite internal review and approval would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to the dissemination of inaccurate or misleading information, potentially violating securities laws and regulations designed to protect investors. Such an action would demonstrate a disregard for internal controls and a failure to exercise professional skepticism, exposing the individual and the firm to reputational damage and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying dissemination indefinitely due to minor, easily rectifiable issues, also fails to meet professional standards. While caution is important, an inability to make timely decisions on non-material points can hinder operational efficiency and potentially disadvantage stakeholders who rely on timely, accurate information. This could be seen as a failure to act with reasonable diligence and to manage risks effectively. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. First, identify the potential risks associated with both immediate dissemination and delay. Second, consult internal policies and relevant regulatory guidance to understand the specific requirements for information release. Third, engage with relevant stakeholders, e.g., legal, compliance, senior management, to seek advice and approvals. Fourth, document all decisions and the rationale behind them. Finally, prioritize actions that ensure both accuracy and timely communication, escalating any significant ambiguities or potential conflicts to higher authority. Question 17. Market research demonstrates a significant untapped market segment for a new financial product. To understand the needs of this segment, a team proposes analyzing existing client data to identify patterns and preferences. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and ethical best practices for financial institutions? Option A. Obtain explicit, informed consent from clients for the use of their data in market research, ensuring transparency about the purpose and scope of the analysis, and employ anonymization techniques where feasible. Option B. Conduct the market research by aggregating client data without specific client consent, assuming that aggregated data is not subject to the same privacy regulations. Option C. Proceed with analyzing all available client data to identify trends, as the insights gained will ultimately benefit clients through improved product offerings. Option D. Utilize only publicly available demographic data for market research, as this avoids any direct interaction with client-specific information. The correct answer is A. Obtain explicit, informed consent from clients for the use of their data in market research, ensuring transparency about the purpose and scope of the analysis, and employ anonymization techniques where feasible. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the pursuit of new market opportunities with the stringent regulatory obligations of the financial services industry. The core tension lies in ensuring that any market research activities, particularly those involving the collection and analysis of sensitive client data, are conducted in full compliance with the relevant regulatory framework. This requires a proactive and diligent approach to data privacy, security, and ethical conduct. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the regulatory framework governing data handling and client interactions. Specifically, it demonstrates a commitment to obtaining explicit consent for data usage, implementing robust data anonymization techniques, and ensuring that all research activities are transparent and align with the principles of data protection and client confidentiality as mandated by the relevant regulations. This proactive compliance mitigates legal risks, maintains client trust, and upholds the firm's reputation. An incorrect approach that involves using client data without explicit consent for market research purposes represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly violates data protection laws, which typically require informed consent for the processing of personal data. It also breaches ethical obligations of confidentiality and trust owed to clients. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on publicly available data without considering its potential for inferring sensitive client information, fails to adequately address the spirit of data protection regulations, which often extend to inferred or aggregated data that could still identify individuals or sensitive patterns. A third incorrect approach, which involves conducting research without a clear data governance policy, risks inconsistent application of data protection principles and increases the likelihood of unintentional breaches or non-compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape. Before initiating any market research, they must identify all relevant data protection laws and guidelines. This should be followed by a risk assessment to evaluate potential data privacy and security vulnerabilities. Subsequently, a clear plan for data collection, storage, usage, and disposal must be developed, ensuring it aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical standards. Obtaining necessary consents, implementing anonymization or pseudonymization techniques where appropriate, and establishing robust internal controls are crucial steps. Finally, ongoing monitoring and periodic review of research practices are essential to maintain compliance in a dynamic regulatory environment. Question 18. The control framework reveals that a junior accountant has identified a potential accounting treatment for a complex transaction that, if applied, would significantly improve the company's reported earnings for the current quarter, potentially impacting executive bonuses. However, the accountant has reservations about the aggressive interpretation of the accounting standard and believes a more conservative approach might be more appropriate, though less favorable to current earnings. The company is under pressure to meet analyst expectations for the quarter. What is the most appropriate course of action for the junior accountant? Option A. Immediately escalate the concern to the head of accounting and the internal audit department, providing a detailed analysis of both the aggressive and conservative accounting treatments and their implications, without making a recommendation on which to use. Option B. Delay reporting the full implications of the transaction until after the quarter closes, allowing time to gather more information and potentially find justification for the aggressive accounting treatment. Option C. Discuss the situation with the head of accounting and suggest applying the aggressive treatment, emphasizing its positive impact on earnings and the potential benefits for the company and its employees. Option D. Proceed with the aggressive accounting treatment to ensure the company meets its quarterly targets and avoids negative analyst reactions, as this is a common practice in competitive markets. The correct answer is A. Immediately escalate the concern to the head of accounting and the internal audit department, providing a detailed analysis of both the aggressive and conservative accounting treatments and their implications, without making a recommendation on which to use. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate business pressures and the long-term integrity of financial reporting. The need to meet quarterly targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential accounting irregularities. Careful judgment is required to balance stakeholder expectations for performance with the fundamental obligation to provide accurate and transparent financial information. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to accounting standards and ethical principles over short-term gains. By initiating an independent review and escalating the concern through appropriate channels, the professional demonstrates a commitment to the accuracy and reliability of financial statements, which is a cornerstone of regulatory compliance and public trust. This aligns with the principles of professional skepticism and due diligence expected of individuals in financial roles, ensuring that any potential misstatements are identified and corrected before they impact financial reporting. An incorrect approach that involves delaying the investigation to avoid impacting quarterly results would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action prioritizes expediency over accuracy, potentially leading to material misstatements in financial reports. Such a delay could violate accounting standards that require timely recognition of financial events and transactions. Ethically, it represents a breach of trust and a failure to act with integrity, as it knowingly allows potentially misleading information to be presented to stakeholders. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to manage the accounting treatment to fit the desired outcome without proper justification, is also a serious failure. This borders on fraudulent financial reporting and undermines the objectivity required in accounting. It violates the principle of faithful representation, which dictates that financial information should reflect the economic substance of transactions, not just their legal form or a desired outcome. This can lead to violations of securities laws and regulations designed to prevent financial misrepresentation. A further incorrect approach, such as dismissing the concern without thorough investigation due to its potential impact on the bonus structure, is a failure of professional skepticism and ethical responsibility. This demonstrates a conflict of interest where personal financial gain is prioritized over professional duty. It neglects the obligation to identify and report potential issues that could affect the financial health and reporting of the company, thereby failing to uphold the integrity of the financial reporting process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue and its potential implications. This involves gathering all relevant facts, consulting applicable accounting standards and company policies, and exercising professional skepticism. If a discrepancy or potential misstatement is identified, the next step is to assess its materiality and impact. Escalation through the appropriate reporting lines, such as to senior management. The audit committee, or internal audit, is crucial. Maintaining documentation of the process and decisions made is also vital for accountability and transparency. This structured approach ensures that decisions are well-reasoned, ethically sound, and compliant with regulatory requirements. Question 19. Benchmark analysis indicates that a client has expressed a strong, immediate desire to liquidate a significant portion of their investment portfolio to fund a speculative venture. While the client is adamant, your preliminary assessment suggests this action carries substantial risk and may not align with their stated long-term financial goals. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound approach to managing this situation? Option A. Proceed with the liquidation as requested by the client to ensure client satisfaction and avoid potential conflict, assuming the client is fully informed of the risks. Option B. Immediately escalate the request to a senior manager for a decision, without conducting any preliminary assessment or discussion with the client. Option C. Inform the client that their request is ill-advised based on your personal experience, and advise them against it without further detailed analysis or exploration of alternatives. Option D. Engage in a detailed discussion with the client to understand the underlying motivations for this request. Present a comprehensive analysis of the risks and potential consequences of liquidation, and explore alternative strategies that might achieve their objectives with less risk, while ensuring all actions align with regulatory guidelines for client suitability and best execution. The correct answer is D. Engage in a detailed discussion with the client to understand the underlying motivations for this request. Present a comprehensive analysis of the risks and potential consequences of liquidation, and explore alternative strategies that might achieve their objectives with less risk, while ensuring all actions align with regulatory guidelines for client suitability and best execution. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate client needs and the long-term implications of a decision, particularly when dealing with potentially sensitive information. The need for a robust decision-making framework is paramount to ensure ethical conduct and compliance with regulatory expectations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, evidence-based evaluation of all available options, considering both immediate and future consequences. This aligns with the principles of acting in the client's best interest while adhering to professional standards of diligence and care. It involves a thorough assessment of risks, benefits, and potential impacts, ensuring that the decision is well-reasoned and defensible. This systematic process helps to mitigate bias and promotes transparency in the decision-making process, which is often a regulatory expectation for financial professionals. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the client's immediate stated preference, without further investigation or consideration of broader implications, fails to meet the duty of care. This could lead to regulatory breaches if the chosen course of action, while satisfying the client in the short term, exposes them to undue risk or contravenes regulatory guidelines designed for client protection. Another incorrect approach, which relies on personal intuition or past experience without a current, objective assessment, is also professionally unsound. While experience is valuable, relying on it exclusively can lead to overlooking new information, changing market conditions, or specific nuances of the current situation. This can result in suboptimal outcomes and potential noncompliance if the intuition is not grounded in current best practices or regulatory requirements. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes expediency over thoroughness, perhaps by making a quick decision to avoid perceived administrative burden, demonstrates a lack of professional diligence. Regulatory frameworks often mandate a certain level of due process and careful consideration, especially when client assets or sensitive information are involved. Rushing a decision can lead to overlooking critical details, increasing the likelihood of errors and potential breaches of conduct. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the problem and the objectives. 2. Gathering all relevant information, including client needs, market data, and regulatory requirements. 3. Identifying and evaluating all potential courses of action, considering their pros and cons. 4. Assessing the risks and benefits associated with each option. 5. Consulting with relevant stakeholders or supervisors if necessary. 6. Making a well-reasoned decision based on the evaluation. 7. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale. 8. Monitoring the outcome and making adjustments if needed. Question 20. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new, less rigorous data validation process for customer onboarding could significantly reduce operational expenses by an estimated 15% annually. This proposed process would streamline the initial data entry and verification steps, potentially speeding up the onboarding timeline. However, it would also reduce the depth of checks performed on certain customer financial indicators, relying more heavily on self-certification for some details. Considering the regulatory framework for financial institutions, which of the following approaches best balances the pursuit of cost efficiency with the imperative of regulatory compliance and ethical conduct? Option A. Proceed with the new process, but instruct the compliance department to increase post-onboarding audits to compensate for the reduced rigor during initial onboarding. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed less rigorous process to identify specific areas where risk can be mitigated through alternative, less resource-intensive controls, and seek regulatory guidance on any proposed deviations from current standards. Option C. Advocate for the new process by highlighting the cost savings and arguing that the current validation process is overly burdensome and not cost-effective, downplaying the potential increase in residual risk. Option D. Implement the new, less rigorous data validation process to achieve immediate cost savings, while relying on the assumption that the reduced checks will not materially impact compliance with anti-money laundering, AML, and Know Your Customer (KIC) regulations. The correct answer is D. Implement the new, less rigorous data validation process to achieve immediate cost savings, while relying on the assumption that the reduced checks will not materially impact compliance with anti-money laundering, AML, and Know Your Customer (KIC) regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate cost savings and long-term reputational risk and regulatory compliance. The company is seeking to reduce expenses, which is a common business objective. However, the proposed method of achieving these savings involves circumventing established internal controls and potentially engaging in practices that could be viewed as misleading or non-compliant with industry standards, even if not explicitly illegal under current, narrowly defined regulations. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing financial pressures with the ethical imperative to maintain integrity and adhere to the spirit, not just the letter, of regulatory expectations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes robust internal controls and transparent reporting, aligning with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance. By advocating for a thorough review and potential enhancement of existing processes, it demonstrates a commitment to accuracy, fairness, and long-term sustainability. This aligns with the overarching goal of financial regulation, which is to ensure market integrity and protect stakeholders. Adhering to established procedures, even if they appear more costly in the short term, prevents potential future liabilities, reputational damage, and regulatory sanctions. It reflects a proactive stance on risk management and a dedication to ethical conduct, which are paramount in any regulated industry. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without considering the downstream implications fails to acknowledge the interconnectedness of financial reporting, operational efficiency, and regulatory adherence. This approach risks violating ethical principles by prioritizing short-term gains over long-term integrity. It may also inadvertently lead to noncompliance with reporting standards if the cost-cutting measures compromise the accuracy or completeness of financial data. Another incorrect approach that suggests bypassing established internal review processes, even with the intention of expediting a decision, undermines the very purpose of those controls. These processes are designed to identify potential risks, ensure accuracy, and maintain compliance. Ignoring them creates a significant ethical and regulatory vulnerability, as it suggests a willingness to operate outside of established governance frameworks. This can be interpreted as a disregard for due diligence and a potential precursor to more serious compliance breaches. A third incorrect approach that involves seeking loopholes or interpretations of regulations to justify the cost-saving measure, without a genuine belief in the ethical soundness of the action, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and a focus on technicalities rather than on the underlying principles of fair dealing and responsible business conduct. It can lead to a culture of compliance washing, where the appearance of adherence is prioritized over actual ethical and regulatory compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted evaluation. First, clearly define the business objective and the proposed method to achieve it. Second, assess the proposed method against all relevant internal policies, ethical guidelines, and regulatory frameworks. This assessment should consider not only explicit prohibitions, but also the spirit and intent of the regulations. Third, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, considering financial, operational, reputational, and regulatory risks. Fourth, consult with relevant stakeholders, including legal counsel, compliance officers, and senior management, to gather diverse perspectives and ensure all angles are considered. Finally, prioritize decisions that uphold integrity, transparency, and long-term sustainability, even if they involve higher upfront costs or require more time.